You guys want to know the best way to enjoy your Sonic experience? Me either. This blue freak has been on quite possibly everything. He's on your phone, your consoles, he's in your walls, and he's even in your car. So while we have a vast pool of great ways to play these games, I'm bored of having fun and realise the only way to get the demons out my head is to introduce new, worse ones. We've all seen countless videos demonstrating the best way to play some of Sonic's mainline outings, but now we're going to see the worst. And this doesn't mean just smacking down on some inferior console version of the game. No. We're taking a deep dive into some of Sega's more regrettable and outright lazy re-releases and assess which ones are just and which ones deserve damnation. So buckle up and let's get started with... I think it's fair to say Sonic 1 is without a doubt the most re-released game in history, possibly contending with Tetris and the original Doom. So while for the sake of this video I'm only going to focus on official releases, I am certain that Sonic 1 will crush the sales when it launches on the clear blue. That being said, this game is easily the one with the most versions to talk about, including a version for the iPod. It's terrifying to know some of you watching this won't know what this is, but back before touchscreens there was this disgusting thing. And with 4 directions and a button in the middle, of course there can be Sonic. I'd like to say this is the worst version of the game, but as a kid I was able to beat this version just fine. And sure, the method of controlling it is about as awkward as Granddad making a racist joke at the dinner table, but this is a functioning Sonic 1. So for this first step in the video, I bring 2 contenders to the table, and both come as anniversary titles oddly enough. We have Sonic Genesis for the GBA, and the version of Sonic 1 you can unlock in Sonic Generations. The latter is confusing to me, being an unlockable extra in Sonic's 20th anniversary outing, and what happened here? This version lags like hell with considerable input delay, and that's on all consoles. Given we have plenty of re-releases and ports of this game on significantly inferior hardware going all the way back to the Sega Saturn, and the fucking iPod, this really makes no sense to function this terribly, especially on account this version is emulated. However, the formerly mentioned Sonic 1 release is considerably worse. A re-release of the first game to celebrate 15 years the Blue Blur, we have Sonic Genesis. 15 is also the amount of brain cells that went into creating this dumpster fire. This version of the game was Digital Eclipse's attempt to bring Sonic's first outing to a console running at twice the speed of the Genesis. And somehow looking at this version, you would think the GBA's processor was 2 paperclips and a dream. Horrible lag that chugs the whole time you're playing the game, and completely butchered physics where Sonic will hold onto all momentum for eternity. If the frame rate and physics weren't bad enough, the screen crunch is abysmal. I know the GBA's screen isn't exactly home cinema size, but surely we didn't need to zoom in this much. Well, I guess because they had to accommodate the smaller screen, it makes some bosses a complete joke. Generations emulated slap-in may be a laggy mess, but at least I can see the whole screen. Here, it's borderline unplayable. Sonic 1 has some dodgy re-releases, but this is easily the worst way to play the game, bar none. So while we can slap Generations on the wrist and say, no, bad emulator, Sonic Genesis is going into Ken Pender's basement to chill out and learn its lesson with green knuckles. Now with that slow unplayable mess out of the way, let's move on to Sonic 2. Yeah, I don't think there's any worse here on this one. Sonic 2 has seen a few re-releases over the years, and while some are better than others, let's be honest, you're not going to find a worse Sonic 2 experience than right here. This is Sonic 2 on Sonic Jam for the Tiger Gamescom. Possibly the most ambitious handheld I've ever seen, and to be fair, it is somewhat impressive for 1997. Having a handheld console running a portable version of Duke Nukem 3D and Resident Evil 2 in concept. I'm not overly sure there is a need to fully explain what makes this version, not optimal, but it is fascinating they tried. They sure did. If you're really wanting a run-up because you're thinking, well, I still somewhat want to play Sonic 2 while not having fun, then look no further than Sonic Classic Collection for the Nintendo DS. The DS's resolution is a bit different to that of the Genesis, so rather than adapt the sprites, we have a gross filter applied and awkward corners cut here. Why is the text moving with the stage? This version is also insanely choppy and has constant lagging, so while nowhere near as bad as Sonic Genesis, my eyes and head were still thankful whenever I looked away from the screen for 2 minutes. And yes, technically Sonic 2 Dash, the Java port of the game, is worse, being a lot choppier and laggier, almost to the degree of Genesis. But I wanted to give at least a playable version to dislike, so I guess Classic Collection would be the third worst way to play Sonic 2, but this certainly isn't your best way to play this classic, and I wouldn't even say it's one to even try given the amount of options we have nowadays. Interestingly enough, all of what I just said for Sonic 2 applies here for Sonic 3 as well, and Sonic & Knuckles by extension. Not that you could tell there's a different game being played here from what you saw earlier, but yeah, about the same notes. Choppy headache in black and white, and choppy choppy headache in colour. It's interesting given how little re-releases we have of Sonic 3, and they just didn't seem to take care here. Granted, you could put the Origins version up on the chopping block because of the selectively swapped out soundtrack thanks to Michael Jackson. Allegedly! But I wouldn't say that ruins the game, so Origins and Classic Collection can get the pass. Sonic Jam, it's onto the pile. Moving on to something a little more modern, let's take a gander at Sonic Colors Ultimate, quite possibly known for how not to do a remaster. Poor performance, questionable changes, stolen artwork, and somehow lagging menus. In a day and age where playing Wii games is still really easy to do, there is zero reason to play this over the original. The customization adds nothing, the new graphics just make the game look dull and insipid. Dying is a pain in the ass because I have to watch Tails drop me back at a snail's pace. And speaking of snail's paces, these load times are infinitely worse, especially on the Switch. I'd say this is the worst version, but we can take it an ever so slight step further. You're seeing the PlayStation 4 version running on my PlayStation 5. Let's have a look at the PC version, shall we? Yeah! Can I also point out my PC listed here is more than above the required specs to run this game, but like we're seeing more and more in this gaming world, PC versions just aren't getting the optimization they need and struggle even on high-end specs. And I know some of you are probably wondering, but the Switch version is somehow not worse. Sure, it's running at a lower frame rate being capped at 30, but it at least stays at 30. So, unless your PC has that dog in him, I'd pick up the Switch version over this. Granted, only now the life-threatening bugs have been patched out, but again, even on higher spec systems, this game just struggles, which for a PC re-release is baffling. To have this little care and attention, given that PC is now one of the biggest ways to play games. Colors Ultimate is a questionable name, given what it adds is superfluous, and what it detracts is an enjoyable time with Sonic Colors. Well, depending on your views of Sonic Colors, I do understand I'm preaching to Sonic fans currently.
This was never really a good franchise.
So it's the Switch version on probation and the PC version, of all things, sharing a blanket with buff Tails. Speaking of shoddy PC versions, what about getting a Wii U game on PC? Sonic Lost World is one of those games I don't think I really know how to feel about it, other than every time I see someone playing it competently I think, this does look cool. And then I play it. The Wii U version is fine and runs exactly how it should, so how did the PC port 2 years later get it so wrong? It comes across as very rushed. The game by default is locked at 60 frames a second, which granted is standard, but for a PC re-release is lacking the option for higher end specs a lot of other re-releases have nowadays. Even then, this game can suffer from serious slowdown issues when playing in full screen mode from, again, lack of optimization. And just getting the display settings is a chore because it was only ever really made with wherever this fucking thing goes. And while there is a method to up the frame rate to be unlimited or to 120 and play the game like that, this has its own set of problems, like how the butterflies needed to progress in this part just, go. Soft locking me. Great. Isn't it interesting how we started at avoid the Nintendo versions to stick to the Nintendo versions? I know I said we're only discussing official releases, but I think what's more insulting is the fact that playing a Wii U emulator with Sonic Lost World is much more stable and enjoyable than the designated PC version. Good job, Sega, and goodbye to our second PC version of the video. We're at about the halfway point of this little deep dive, and I still have the headache Sonic Genesis gave me. If you're enjoying the video so far, then let me know. Comment below your favorite Ken Penders moment. Mine was when he paraphrased a poem about the Holocaust, but in the context of Knuckles the Echidna. This really happened. And hey, while we're here, if you want to see more like this, then please show your support by liking and subscribing. It does so much more than you think for the cost of 2 clicks, but that's enough shilling, let's crack on. For the next section... Get it? Sonic 4? Like Sonic 2 and 3, Sonic 4 episodes 1 and 2 are pretty much in the same boat, except Sonic 2 and 3 were games made with love, passion, and to be a mainline Sonic game, and Sonic 4 started life as a mobile version that they then said, you know what would make this game sell 10 times the units? We name it the sequel to Pink! The console versions, including the Wii version, are all fine. The mobile versions, especially episode 1, suffer from screen crunch though, which doesn't help the already questionable level design of Sonic 4. But interestingly enough, episode 1 on mobile did receive an update, upgrading the models to be more HD to accommodate the ever-growing market of higher spec mobile devices. So where am I going with this? Well, you don't think it's on a joke of a dead console now, do ya? As in, do ya? Get it? That's 2 for 2, that's what you're here for, it's what we love, it's what we know. Yeah, so remember this thing? Well, it has Sonic 4 episodes 1 and 2 on here, and it's horrible. Ungodly performance despite just being the mobile versions blown up on HD screens. This version also looks horrendous. There's really not much more I can say here, just look at it. Episode 2 sort of gets the pass. Episode 1 just sucks. Moving on. To go to the actual Sonic 4, that's sure to spark a debate, we have Sonic Mania. Now, you may be wondering, there's only really about 4 consoles to play it on, with the Xbox, the PlayStation, the Switch, and the PC, and they're all fine. Well, you're right, except there's one version that came out pretty recently. Actually fucking Netflix! Yes, so Netflix started its own little gamer service, and one version is Sonic Mania Plus. This is a bizarre mobile port you can only get through the Netflix app, and it sucks. I don't know how hard it was just to make this work on mobile, given the game was already developed by the people who literally made their mark in the industry, with their mobile versions of Sonic 1, 2, and CD, but here we are. The texture filtering is messed up, there's no compensation for wider phone screens, which the other games had, by the way, so we're left with this garish border of just nothing. Not to mention this Netflix UI looks grim. How do we go from the personality exploding menus of the original to this? It's not like the other mobile versions had this issue, as well as Sonic 1 and 2 on mobile look great. And this is before the gameplay as well, like, sure it plays fine, but the game crashes all the time. You would think by now Sega would have realized that outsourcing their re-releases and ports to other companies just isn't gonna yield good results, and they need to keep it in-house. Well, at least the gang can now catch up on Baby Reindeer. I know we haven't touched a whole lot on some of the more mainline 3D Sonic games, so let's finish up there. Now, truth be told, there isn't exactly a whole lot of interesting ones to go over. Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 you can just chalk up to being the Steam versions, being that they're just the Xbox and PlayStation releases, which is just the GameCube version, only with obnoxious borders. Sure, there's much better ways to play them, but this isn't exactly worth talking about. I'd say the only ones really worth going over is how Sonic Heroes and Shadow the Hedgehog really did not like the PlayStation 2. These versions just don't work compared to the GameCube or Xbox versions. It's night and day how much these frame rate issues hinder a game. For Sonic 06, you could just argue the worst way to play it is just by playing it, but that's being pessimistic. Realistically, the PS3 version loads slower than the Xbox 360 version, if you can believe the game could load any slower, and also seems to have more glitches and bugs, but given what we're discussing here, I'd argue that's just the Sonic 06 experience, so maybe take what I said just now with a pinch of salt. After Sonic 06, however, the furry fandom rejoiced as we got Sonic Unleashed. This game is interesting to talk about as we still have no PC version, yet the awkward parkour simulator got one, and the supposed best version doesn't even run on its original hardware. It took another 2 generations of backwards compatibility with the Xbox Series X just to be able to play this game at a consistent frame rate. The obvious answer here is probably the Wii version being the worst, but I don't know, that version actually has aspects I prefer from the HD version. Minimized hub worlds, the meta requirements are nowhere near as egregious, and I think the Wiimote and Nunchuck Wagglefest works well for the Werehog. What a lot of people don't know, however, is Sonic Unleashed had a PlayStation 2 version. Yeah, I didn't really know this existed either until I saw a copy while browsing eBay, and even then I thought it was a bootleg. But here we are, Sonic Unleashed for the Wii on PlayStation 2. I'd say it's the worst version, but only by process of elimination. Performance and control-wise, it's fine, but graphically it just doesn't really compare to the Wii version. I'd say it's perfect if you don't like the Wii controls, but the Wii version also lets you use a GameCube controller or Pro controller, so that eliminates the controller argument. Otherwise, it's nothing too remarkable, just interesting it even exists. You can go back on the shelf. And that is going to wrap up this little dive into some of Sonic's outings and less successful re-releases. I'm fully aware I haven't even scratched the surface here, but these are the ones I just found most interesting. We can look into some of the early handhelds and its 8-bit versions, but that will mostly just chalk up to screen crunch, and I hate Sonic Blast, so fuck that game and fuck talking about it. And sure, we can talk about some newer titles like Sonic Forces and Sonic Frontiers, but both of these boil down to what we said earlier, which is just don't play the Nintendo version. And I think in retrospect, that's the lesson of today, folks. Sega really does want Nintendo. Where is that music coming from? Like, what is that? That's Pumpkin Hill. Who's playing Pumpkin Hill in 2025? Oh my god, is that Green Knuckle?